Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Storytelling Vlaire. I'm here to give you guys my very first review, Superman: Secret Origins. I wanted to share this book with you guys because Superman is one of my favorite superheroes, and honestly, this is probably my favorite origin story for that character. By the way, it's written by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, and both of them are a phenomenal team. I forgot to mention that. I'm just going to do a quick little run through with this book, and hopefully I'll persuade you guys to read it, buy it, or maybe we can start a discussion afterwards. We start off the story where Clark is playing football with Pete and the rest of his friends. And honestly, I think this is a really great scene to kind of show. You know, Clark wants to be a regular boy and he wants to hang out with his friends, but he realizes that he can't because, you know, he's the Man of Steel. Pete runs into him, breaks his arm, and he ends up having a talk with Papa John. And honestly, it's absolutely great. The way Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent are done is incredibly true to the characters. Jonathan is very worried about his son, about how he's going to fit in, about how the world's going to perceive him. And Martha is very, very, very loving. She's very controlling around Clark. She's really worried about him, and she doesn't want him to reveal himself. She wants him to be his little baby boy for forever. And by the way, I love how she makes his costume for him. Although it seems kind of weird, especially since she can't actually cut the cloth, I love the idea that she was the one who made the costume for him. Not that he found it in a spaceship somewhere. It's just, to me, it's great writing. Anyway, so as you go through the book, you're introduced more into Pete and Lana Lang, who Lana has a little crush on Clark, and it's absolutely adorable. What I absolutely love between the two is when she kisses Clark and his eyes glow red, and all of a sudden he just shoots heat vision because he's bashful. It's just a great scene. One thing that I'm not a big fan of is Lex Luthor is a resident of Smallville. This is weird for me because I prefer the idea of Clark and Lex not interacting with each other until he reaches Metropolis. It's weird to know that Lex Luthor, billionaire Lex Luthor, was born and raised in Kansas, Smallville, next to Clark. It's weird. I like the idea of him being from a small town and he wants to forget about it and being a child of a drunk, but it's just too convenient for me that it's Smallville. I'm not a big fan of it. But what I am a fan of is Superman becoming Superboy and actually doing things. Another YouTuber, I can't remember his name, but he brought up a good point that it makes everything that happened in the Superboy comics, the original Superboy Prime comics, it makes all of that relevant. And I think, you know what? It's a great idea, especially because it's going to start Clark on his path to becoming Superman. And another part of the comic book that I didn't really care for was the Legion of Superheroes, how they came to show up and to, gawk about him. I liked the comic, that little issue. I liked it, but I wasn't convinced with their motives. Why? I understood that they loved him and they adored him, so they wanted to go back to the past to see him, but it just felt a little forced. Especially for people who don't know who the Legion of Superheroes are. It kind of comes out of left field, and you're going through this ride that you don't fully understand. But, again, what I like about it is it, again, pushes Clark towards that journey of becoming a superhero, and he realizes that he is not so alone as he thinks he is. Which is another thing that the story does a great job of painting. Okay, so then here's where I absolutely love the story. I know it sounded like I was nitpicking on the last part, but to be honest with you, this is the gold. When Clark first arrives at Metropolis, I love it. He bumps into this old lady and she's just like, "Watch where you're going! Don't be looking up in the sky! Nobody in Metropolis looks at the sky! Watch where you're going!" Everybody is selfish. I love what Jimmy says to Superman when he says that Metropolis is like a sick dog covered and weighed down by fleas. It is absolutely great. It makes you feel like Metropolis is Gotham without Superman. And it feels absolutely great. I love how bumbling and silly Clark is. I love how much of a sore thumb he feels when he's walking about town and everybody's just kind of like, "Ah, get out of the way, what are you doing?" It's absolutely great and completely in character for Clark. Another thing that this story did very, very well, and I've never seen any other Superman story do this, Lex Luthor having his own Lex, what is it called? Help me here, guys. Lottery. His little Lex lottery. I love that idea. Absolutely great. That every single morning, people all around Metropolis crowd outside of his door, waiting for him to show up on his balcony to greet them, and he picks one person a day to help them and change their life. Great. Absolutely great. Completely in character for Lex Luthor. Completely. He wants these people to see him as a god, as a messiah, as the next big thing. That this is Lex Luthor, and I should be so happy that I'm in the vicinity, I'm in the area of Lex Luthor, and I absolutely love it. And I also like that Clark is kind of, he doesn't really catch on to things with Lex. He's just like, oh yeah, maybe he's a good guy, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't really assume the worst. Again, that's just Clark being Clark. I love the introduction of Lois Lane. Honestly, I think this is my favorite Lois Lane I have ever read from any of the books. I really do. Her introduction was screaming at Perry, saying that she's getting ready to walk out of the Daily Planet, was one of the best things ever. And then she immediately grabs Clark by the hand and says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna show you the town. Let's go." And really, she uses him to get to the private LexCorp weapons testing, whatever it was, and she gets in there and she basically abandons Clark. It's so in character with Lois Lane. I absolutely love it. And the reveal of Superman, Lois falls off the cliff and then all of a sudden he catches her, takes her down, and everyone's like, whoa, who are you, blah 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 blah. It was absolutely great. It was something magical, something straight out of the Richard Donner films. On like the first issue for Superman was for this or the third. What was the third issue? The third issue was really, really great. Then things ramp up. The government gets involved, General Lane, and all of a sudden Lex Luthor is just coming after Superman, and it gets really intense. And I absolutely love it. They don't give him a chance to speak. Superman has doubts. He's just like, oh, I shouldn't, I don't know how I feel about this. Once this, like his parents tell him that, once the secret's out, and he's having self-doubts and whatnot. And even Jimmy Olsen is having self-doubts, and maybe that he should leave and go back to New York. And I love that both him and Superman have a nice talk and actually become friends at the very beginning. I absolutely love that. Him and Jimmy have to have a relationship. You know what they did in the New 52 where they didn't even have one, and it was absolutely terrible. And honestly, it's so great, especially the scene where General Lane and Superman were to have the interview until it turned into an interrogation, and Superman was just like, no, I'm not having this. And then Metallo shows up, and all of a sudden it becomes a big fist fight, and it's just absolutely great. But before that, another thing I wanted to highlight on was the scene where, I think his name is Corbin, Lieutenant Corbin. He shows up to the Daily Planet with a bunch of roses for Lois, and Lois basically tells him to F off, and he looks at her really aggressively. He's like, you're coming with me. And Clark just walks up. He's just like, hi, Corbin. Nice to meet you. And just shakes his hand real firm, but he gives him this big gullible smile and just kind of tells him to, buzz off. It was just so in character for Clark. And I don't know. I absolutely loved it. Now, by the end of the story, Clark, of course, saves the day. And I loved this. The citizens came up to Clark and they're just looking at him. And they're like, oh, you're like the Messiah. Why do you do these things? What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? And Clark looks at him and he's just like, I don't want you to do anything. Like, don't worship Lex and don't worship me. I've been given great gifts, but, you guys have gifts too. And I think you guys should help each other with those gifts. Just completely in character for Superman. Just completely in character. That when I think of Superman, that's what I think of. He's just a normal guy doing the one and only thing that he could do, helping people. And I love it. The final scene where Clark asks Lois, oh hey, let's go get coffee, and then he has like a little snippet that says, meet me on the roof, and then she runs up there and Superman's up there and they have a little moment. It was just absolutely magical. Honestly, I wish this story would have continued. I wish there was a second book. I mean, I know the two get back together for 2 more stories, and I'm going to do those stories. But I wish this was a continuous book that I could just, like a series that would just keep on going. Maybe like the Ultimate series from Marvel. But anyway, so my only issues with the story is Lex Luthor being in Smallville, and I feel like Clark sticks out a little too much. I like this Clark, but he sticks out just a little too much. I feel like it's a little obvious for the Daily Planet to catch on that he's Superman. I know that's a big complaint that everyone says just to begin with, but I think All-Star Superman did it best, where when Clark was walking around, he was like this. When Superman was walking around, he was like this. And it just made a big difference in how people perceived him. And in this one, he was just like, "Hi, Lois." I don't know. That's just my point of view. Anyway, all things aside, I give Superman's Secret Origins a 9 out of 10. It is my favorite Superman story I have read so far. So far. I could find another one and like it even more, you know? I want to keep an eye on... I want to look for Superman Returns to Bizarro World. It's written by Richard Donner and Jeff Johns, and, you know, maybe that could end up being my favorite Superman story. But as of right now, Superman's Secret Origins is one of my favorite Superman stories ever told. And if you haven't read it and you're a Superman fan, you owe it to yourself to read this book. Now, anyway, guys, so this was my first review out of many. I'm going to be doing Wonder Woman reviews every week up until the release of the movie, so stay tuned for those. I'm going to be going through a lot of her origin stories, the New 52, and even the Rebirth stories. So anyway, give me a like, comment, or subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next video. Bye!